Welcome to Sunday Mornings, Chris Jansing. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, this is what evil looks like. ISIS terrorists behead Marquette graduate James Foley. Texas Governor Rick Perry is indicted but strikes a defiant tone. Scott Walker and Mary Burke wrangle over job creation and Medicaid expansion. And in a sign of the times, years from now, people will look back on August 2014 and see this. Well, this unusual and wildly successful charity event. That was cold. The challenge is accepted. All of it was for a good cause, the ALS Foundation, which has raised tens of millions of dollars, and yeah, it was really cold. But we start with ongoing tensions between the black community and police. Attorney General Eric Holder visits Ferguson, Missouri amid ongoing controversy over the police shooting of 18-year-old Michael Brown. Accounts of that shooting differ dramatically, but the case has sparked national outrage and attention, including in Milwaukee. Late last week, Milwaukee Alderman Mullaly Coggs issued a statement linking Ferguson to Milwaukee. Coggs flatly called murder's death murder and said, as painful as it is to watch the coverage of the unrest in Ferguson, whether one wants to admit it or not, Milwaukee is just a death or two away from Ferguson. The death of Michael Brown was Ferguson's spark, and if Milwaukee does not make changes soon, I believe our spark is coming. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, former state representative Michelle Litchens, political strategist Linda Bruin, and media trackers Brian Sigmund. We'll start with you, Michael Holt. Is she right about that? Are we one incident away, or are there differences between Milwaukee and Ferguson?
No, absolutely. We're one or two deaths away. We've had like 5 or 6 similar incidents of police killing unarmed black men, includes at Arrow Park last year, etc. I mean, so I'm really surprised we have not witnessed any kind of disruption of the status quo over a period of time. But, you know, Milwaukee is a microcosm of the United States. There were 400 black men killed by police officers last year, and half of those have sparked lawsuits. We get 62 lawsuits.
But do we know actually what happened yet? I mean, why has there been the rush to judgment? I mean, we still don't have all of the facts. We haven't heard both sides of the story. You know, I mean, wouldn't it be more prudent to wait until we figured out what happened before issuing inflammatory statements, basically saying that Milwaukee's a tinderbox?
Milwaukee is a tinderbox. And you know, those folks who get upset with Sheriff David Clark's statements in the past, I think he's the only one who can stand on Center Street and stop some of the potential violence. The mayor can't, they call for his head. You know, the district attorney can't. Chief Flynn can't.
Okay, are we just one or two shootings away from?
I think Milwaukee is very different than Ferguson is. In Ferguson, only 6% of the police officers are African American. In Milwaukee, about 40% of the officers here are a minority of some sort. So I think there's a vast difference there. In Ferguson, 47% of the young black men there are unemployed. So I think this protest in
Milwaukee is 56.8%.
34% depending on where you look. Yeah. So they have the most segregated metropolitan city in the
the most segregated city in the United States.
Okay.
I'm going to echo Michael on this one, because I think while I agree with Michelle about the police statistics, and I think that is a big plus that could help lower the rhetoric on this and lower the inflammation on this. The bottom line is, with Milwaukee in the African American community having some of the highest rates of not only unemployment but highest rates of incarceration in the nation, especially compared to whites in Milwaukee, I think some of the basic things that get people very upset and distrust the police and distrust the white society are here.
Brian Sigma.
No, I think what we're seeing in Ferguson is not the result of a single law enforcement officer taking the life of an apparently unarmed African American young man. What we're seeing is something that's completely fabricated. It's built built up over time. We had that incident. There was a local protest. That was certainly understandable. Then the police responded. They behaved badly. They did not help calm the tensions in the area. Then the media comes in. It becomes a circling spiral. Then you have Jesse Jackson coming in, using this as a chance to be on the national stage. Then ultimately Eric Holder comes in, and we're really not quite sure what Eric Holder was doing there. This is something that spiraled out of control because people were looking for something to focus on. They were looking for, it was a quiet media cycle. It became a zoo. There's no reason Milwaukee would ever have to become like this if something happened here in Milwaukee.
Well, see, I'm actually going to agree with Michael Hope, probably for a different reason, because in fact, we do have people who would exploit something like this, who would seek to get political advantage. I thought it was very interesting. Milwaukee Cogs issues a statement about the poverty and the hopelessness and the joblessness in Milwaukee. But why do we never hear from people like Milwaukee Cogs when there are other shootings in this community? Where has she been on reforming MPS? Where has she been in having a lead dealing with these problems of the economy? See, unfortunately, we have too many people, I think, in this community who would be willing to play that kind of race card, regardless of what the facts are going to be. So I would like to agree that we are not like Ferguson, Missouri, but the reality is that I think we have as dysfunctional a political environment here, and the racial divisions are certainly as
do not underestimate the level of frustration in the black community about systemic racism and all of these incidents involving the police, etc. You know, it could very easily spill over. Ferguson is not really just about this one guy. Ferguson is endemic of.
Okay, but what if it turns out, Michael? What if it turns out that this young man, in fact, did punch the officer? We don't know what the facts are, and he did bull rush the officer. If those were the facts, will people's reaction be different than that, or is it already baked into the cake?
Yeah, I think it will, but. It seems like this locomotive has gone too far.
Well,
there's so much steam. I don't know if you can slow it.
Well, that was my question. So, what has your glass half full, and what is your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, my glass is half full because U.S. Attorney Eric Holder arrived in Ferguson, Missouri, and will lead an investigation to the killing of the 18-year-old unarmed black youth who was killed by police. My glass is half empty because of charges are not brought against the officer. I fear that city will burn.
Michelle Litchens.
My glass is half full because Walworth police are ticketing illegal immigrants for not having a valid driver's license. My glass is half empty because these people are here. They need to get to work, and we won't see Congress or our president fix our immigration problem anytime soon.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my glass is half full because the 2 Americans with Ebola were successfully treated with an experimental vaccine. But my glass is half empty because 30,000 Africans who need a vaccine likely won't get one. Ebola is a rare disease found in poor countries, so pharmaceutical companies don't profit by making a vaccine. The few that were available have been used.
Brian Sickma.
Well, my glass is half empty because a special prosecutor in Texas got a grand jury in a Democrat-leading county to indict Republican Governor Rick Perry. But my glass is half full because Perry has vowed to fight the partisan charges. It's time for politics by prosecution to end.
Well, my glass is half full because moments after he said he was heartbroken by the execution of James Foley, President Obama was back on the golf course again. It's half full because by the end of his presidency, his handicap should be awesome. Next on Sunday Inside, business and government leaders on a fast break for a new arena for the Milwaukee Bucks. The push for a new downtown Milwaukee arena may be on the fast track. Tim Sheehy, the president of the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce, says that plans for public financing need to be ready to go to the legislature in January of next year, with construction beginning next spring. The new owners of the Bucks have said the arena could cost between $400 million and $500 million, and that there will have to be some public support, read tax dollars. Former owner Herb Cole and the new owners Mark Lasry and Wesley Edens have committed $200 million of their own money. But is this kind of timetable doable, Brian Sickma?
Well, I'm not sure if this kind of timetable is
You're not
absolutely
related to Jack
necessary.
Sickma,
No,
right?
I'm not
So
related to Jack
there's no
Sickma.
conflict of interest with the
There's
Sickma
no
thing.
inside knowledge coming out
because
about the Bucks.
I'll get emails about that. People will say, okay, is this like Jack Sickma's kid or something?
Yeah, no,
okay.
unfortunately, I don't have any special insight into the Milwaukee Bucks past or present. But I do think this timetable is a little bit contrived. I mean, I understand the Bucks want to get a new arena, they want to get this moving underway, but but there is an advantage to them to publicly put pressure on the state and on local policymakers to come up with a decision fast, and I think that's what they're trying to do. I think as you look at these plans, I think Representative Dale Quinga made a very good point. He said we don't need to have state taxpayers bailing out the Milwaukee Bucks, but if there is a way for them to make use of resources they already have in a more wise and efficient fashion, that's something the state could take a look at.
Okay, Linda Bruin.
Well, I agree with Brian that this time frame is very aggressive, and frankly, the NBA wants a stadium built by 2017,
right.
and you can do a construction cycle that starts a little bit later than the timetable they've given and get it still done by 2017. So maybe they want it done because they want to test the waters of how much political support is actually out there. Maybe part of their financial arrangements requires a faster timetable, but I don't believe they have to do it on this timetable for construction.
You've been in the legislature. I would think that the logical question to ask from the point of the legislature is, you're talking about a timetable. There's no plan.
Right.
There's nothing.
Right.
We don't even know where it's going to go. We don't know what kind of taxes we're talking about. I mean, there's zero plan on the table.
There is, but I do think the state has a responsibility anytime a business is thinking about leaving the state to talk about what kind of money the state might lose and what they might be able to do to keep them here. So legislators have been talking. I know the speaker talked to the governor and asked the Fiscal Bureau to come up with some numbers of what loss the state might see if the Bucks decide to leave the state of Wisconsin. So, and what they might be able to do to keep them here.
I have a really hard time imagining a Republican legislature and a Republican governor approving taxpayer financing for this stadium.
Well, unless they look at the numbers, and there are a lot of numbers to look at out there, and say this is the money we could lose. Maybe we could use that money to subsidize them a little bit.
Okay,
and the status. And if I recall, when we were talking about building Miller Park, there was a Republican governor named Tommy Thompson who was pushing the initiative, and he had support from Republican lawmakers. I think Milwaukee needs to keep the Bucks right here for quality of life and to save downtown. But at the same time, I think there should be a little more flexibility.
Michael, you and I are going to have a very interesting discussion on this, because we were just discussing the whole problem of poverty and joblessness and the crappy schools and the divide in this community, and now we're talking about massive corporate welfare for out-of-town billionaires. I just wonder how that's going to sell. You may not want to hear it, but we're going to tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael, you get to go first.
Well, my unsolicited advice goes to Ferguson, Missouri Mayor James Noel, who said the city doesn't have a race problem. You're so out of touch with reality, you probably believe there is a Santa Claus.
Michelle Letchins.
To the U.S. government, with the beheading of James Foley, people are requesting the U.S. pay ransom to terrorists in return for American hostages. If we did that, every American traveling overseas would have a dollar sign on their head. So please don't do it.
Linda Bruin.
United Kingdom officials may start revoking the citizenship of Britons who become terrorists and fight against the UK abroad. They may also arrest anyone who downloads and distributes terrorist footage, like the beheading of James Foley. My advice is that they start doing these things right away, and we should too.
Brian Sickma.
Well, Mr. President, as Iraq battles the cancer of ISIS, an American journalist is executed and a two-star general killed in Afghanistan is buried. Get off the golf course. You ran for the office. You need to assume the responsibilities of the job.
Well, my unsolicited advice is to State Senator Joe Liebum. Now, you would be within your rights to ask for a recount in the 6th Congressional District primary, but you know better than most that a 219-vote margin is too big to be overcome in a 3-week-long recount. You can do it, but don't. Next on Sunday Insight, free breakfast and lunch for all MPS students. Is that a good idea? Nobel laureate economist Milton Friedman once said, "There's no such thing as a free lunch," but don't tell that to the kids in Milwaukee Public Schools. Not only is there a free lunch, there's also a free breakfast for everyone, regardless of income. Starting this year, MPS is providing the free meals to every student, even students whose families might otherwise be able to afford it. The meals are being provided under the federal Community Eligibility Program, which allows schools with a large number of low-income children to provide meals to all of the kids in the district. Good idea, Linda Bruin?
Actually, I don't think so. I actually think this is a very big deal. I think it signals a major philosophical shift as to who should be responsible for paying for lunches and paying for the food that their children eat. And I don't have a problem with truly low-income, poor kids having free lunches or reduced lunches. But once we start paying for middle-class lunches and wealthy kids' lunches, I think that's a problem. My kids went through MPS. We're not poor. We could afford their lunches. And I don't think that is a wise policy for government to be getting into.
Okay, Brian Sickman.
I agree 100% with Linda Bruin. I don't say that very often, but no, I think that's exactly what's
coming around.
She's
coming around.
Only on this, I suppose.
But Charlie, I mean, look at MPS. I mean, consistent. This is the worst performing school district in the state. This is a district that has struggled to educate children, and one of the problems, one of the reasons they've had trouble educating children is because they've had a lack of parental involvement. And as Michael will tell you, they're across all sectors of the community in Milwaukee, you need to have more parental involvement. When you tell parents you don't have to worry about what your kids are eating in the morning or what they have at lunch, you're removing more parental responsibility. They need to be active and concerned about what their kids are doing at school.
Okay, now, see, I actually don't have a problem with feeding hungry kids. I don't have a problem with the argument that a child who hasn't had breakfast or lunch cannot learn. I get that. But that's where we have the social safety net, that if you are a low-income child who cannot otherwise afford it. But how does that morph, Michael Holt, into an entitlement for the middle class and the upper middle class and the flat-out rich, if there are any rich people who send their kids to MPS?
Well, yeah, some, 5 or 6 of them. Yeah, and I do have some problems with expanding it to upper middle class folks, etc. But is there a greater good to come from this? Because children who do not eat do not learn.
How is it a greater good if you're diverting our school tax dollars in an already stressful school system?
MPS is doing it now anyway.
But we're diverting that money for middle income and wealthy families? No, they're not.
That means
it won't go to books and it won't go to teachers.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the wrong thing for the school system to be doing. They need to be, as Brian was talking about, engaging more parents. We need to stop this entitlement and government dependency culture that we're breeding in the state. And the more the school does, the more the government does for the families and these children, I think the less parents are going to do for their children.
I think that's the key point, is that there's kind of a zero-sum game, is that the larger the footprint of the responsibility of the schools, we're shrinking what we expect from parents. And the notion that middle-class parents who might drive their kids to a school in a Lexus, and in some of the suburbs that's the case, can't be expected to give their kids breakfast. It almost it establishes the habit and the expectation of free stuff and dependency. And I understand that there's more than 80% of the kids already are eligible for the low-income lunch. And the argument would be, I suppose, that this eliminates the stigma on it. But on the other hand, as Lynn says, you have a finite number of resources. And if you have the resources that are aimed at the genuinely poor and you begin to divert them, to the middle class and the upper middle class, I mean, there's going to be a crunch time at some point.
But remember a couple of years ago when the NAACP got involved because MPS had stopped giving those lunches to low-income folks whose parents did not fill out the forms. There was a big controversy about that. So MPS went back to giving it to anyone. So I'm saying they're doing it already. Whether you see it or not, they're doing it.
What about summer then? I mean, are we going to then open up school lunches in the summer? I mean,
to
an extraordinary level. We're doing it partially.
Do you know what this is called? Do you know what this is called, Lynn? This is called liberalism. What is it that you don't get? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
What I don't get is why other NFL referees have not joined Mike Carey in refusing to work in games involving the Washington Redskins. Carey's protest is centered on his belief that redskin is a racist term. Scored a touchdown for a man with convictions.
Michelle Litchens.
Charlie, what I don't get is the environmentalist solar farm in California kills a bird about every 2 minutes as they fly over the panels, and it's okay. But when ATC wants to build a new transmission line through Wisconsin, the environmentalists ask if we really need more power because it might harm an insect.
Linda Bruin.
Well, I'm glad the federal government tracks crime statistics on how many police officers are killed in the line of duty. But what I don't get is why they don't also track how many civilians are killed by police officers. The vast majority of these are justified, but not collecting this information turns a blind eye to possible abuse.
Brian Sickma.
Well, what I don't get is why U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder went to Ferguson, Missouri last week. Isn't it the job of the justice system to not take sides until all the facts are known?
Well, what I don't get is why a group financed by Chris Abele photoshopped pictures of the 6'4" Sheriff David Clark onto the body of a much smaller, shorter man. Oh, wait, I do get it. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first,
This is today's TMJ4 update. Good morning. I'm Tom Murray.
And I'm Storm Team forecaster Jesse Rick. A much better day today. This Sunday we'll have more sunshine compared to that dreary and damp Saturday. We're looking at decreasing cloud cover. Temps along the lakefront in the 70s, low 80s. Inland, a steamy and warm Monday with scattered chances for rain showers Monday through Thursday. A much drier but cooler Labor Day weekend.
Jesse, thank you. A mass of remembrance will be held today for the American journalist killed overseas by terrorists. ISIS militants posted a video on Tuesday showing his murder. James Foley graduated from Marquette University back in 1996. A vigil is planned at Marquette Tuesday night. Later today, Milwaukee Alderwoman Malele Coggs plans to host an event to address the increase in violence and crime in the city. The Heal the Hood block party begins at 2 this afternoon at the corner of 24th and Keefe. Organizers say they want neighbors to come together in a positive way. You're up to date now on today's TMJ4.
It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, an article by Joe McNally in the Shepherd Express last week implied black folks who overwhelmingly supported David Clark were either stupid or naive. McNally's assessment was not only nonsensical, but insulting, if not racist. Sorry, Joe. Some of us field Negroes dare to put support for other black folks before that of the plantation bosses. Last I heard, we were given our freedom to do just that.
Michelle Litchens.
Well, I have to hand it to Chris Matthews for showing his disappointment and asking President Obama to strike back against ISIS. Now, it took the beheading of a fellow journalist to do so, but for finally calling out the president, you are a winner. My loser, again, is President Obama. If he didn't want to do the job of president, like attend the funeral of a two-star general, protect America from evil terrorists, pass a budget, et cetera, then why did he work so hard to get elected?
Linda Bruin.
Well, obviously all terrorists are losers, but my focus is on the 3,000 Europeans and Americans who have joined ISIS or al-Qaeda. The risk of homegrown terrorists using their passports to carry out attacks on American soil is high. These people are already traitors and should be treated as such. My winner is the high school senior who was suspended after she said "bless you" to a classmate who sneezed. Her school has forgotten that the freedom to express one's faith is as important as not imposing one's faith or lack of faith on others.
Brian Sigma.
My winner this week is former President George W. Bush. In 2003, Bush gave up golf while commander-in-chief. In 2008, he explained, saying, quote, "I don't want some mom whose son may have recently died to see their commander-in-chief playing golf," unquote. That's recognizing priorities. My loser this week is Susan Happ, the Democratic candidate for Attorney General. In 2000, Happ, then a defense attorney, argued that an admitted habitual child molester was actually not a predator. Now she says she wants to protect Wisconsin's kids as Attorney General. That just doesn't jive.
I'm tempted to say Linda Bruin is my winner because she's sounding like Dick Cheney. My winner is, though, as American medicine. Kent Brantley, the doctor who was infected by Ebola, left the hospital last week, cured, a medical miracle. Loser, kids. If you're already back in school, you are being ripped off because summer's not over yet. School should never start until after Labor Day. Take it up with your parents. Thanks for joining us and joining my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.